Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Edward Bramson from Sherborne Investors at Barclays has once again renewed his calls and his campaign against Jess Staley and Barclays Investment Bank. Now, this has been an ongoing saga for quite some time, and Jess Staley has wanted to get rid Edward Bramson has wanted to get rid of Jess Staley for quite some time. And we've been following this as these two have battled behind the scenes. And I've stated several times that it's going to come to a head a lot sooner than they talked about. They were saying that it'll be next year by the time Jess Staley is replaced. And I said, well, before the coronavirus anyway, I said that there is no chance that he makes it into all the way until 2021. And I still believe that that's the case. But whereas I thought he'd be gone by the end of August, I'm thinking that it is going to be a little bit longer than that, considering the pandemic, the coronavirus, and Barclays not wanting to throw their whole entire structure, their leadership structure, into chaos when they're already dealing with this pandemic. So that totally slowed things down, and it gave Edward Bramson some time to hit the brakes. He was really, really going hard with the getting rid of Jess Staley narrative, and once the coronavirus pandemic settled in, they kind of backed off a little bit. But once again, the battle is on, and Edward Bramson is most assuredly not happy with the investment bank at Barclays and with Jess Staley's leadership. Our article today is from the Financial Times. The headline is, Edward Bramson renews activist campaign against Barclays Investment Bank. The author of this article is Owen Walker. Edward Bramson has revived his activist campaign against Barclays Investment Bank, despite this division at the UK lender benefiting from a surge in revenues this year. And you see, again, folks, it's not about what was on the balance sheet just this year. It's the overall, overarching situation with Jess Staley. And Bramson is going to use anything in his favor to try and get rid of Jess Staley, because Bramson understands that Jess Staley is not going to be able to lead them in the future to the promised land. All of these people in the financial sector with Jeffrey Epstein's stink hanging all over them are going to face, if not criminal repercussions, then assuredly they're going to face professional repercussions. And we've seen it already with Glenn Dubin, we've seen it with Les Wexner, and we have seen it with the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family. These people who were in Epstein's atmosphere, who were in his orbit, well, they are not going to get the exclusive jobs they once had. They're not going to be part of these sort of companies anymore, because at the end of the day, these companies are all about turning a profit. These companies are killers when it comes to that. And if you're not part of the solution, you most certainly are part of the problem. And according to Bramson and Sherborne, who are the biggest investors in Barclays, Jess Staley is a stain and he must be removed. In a letter to shareholders in his investment vehicle, Sherborne Investors, this week, Mr. Bramson said the effects of the coronavirus crisis had significantly distorted the first-half results of all banks and renewed his call for Barclays to cut its trading division to boost profitability. And again, it's another swipe at Jess Staley, right? Because Jess Staley is obviously the investment banking guy. I mean, he spent 34 years at J.P. Morgan facilitating Jeffrey Epstein's money. He spent 34 years being cozy with Jeffrey Epstein while Jeffrey Epstein was on a reign of terror. And, I mean, let's be real. He probably spent a lot of that time hiding money for Jeffrey Epstein as well. I don't have evidence to prove that, but from what we have learned about these bankers, and especially in regards to the way Jeffrey Epstein conducted himself and conducted business, I don't believe that anybody who was involved with him financially, as far as being part of a big institution like this, could have not known what he was doing financially behind the scenes. Trading in equities and fixed income has been a rare bright spot for global banks throughout the coronavirus crisis, as clients rushed to reposition their portfolios throughout the frenzied markets in the first half of the year. And again, this just goes to show you how strongly Bramson and Sherborne feel about getting rid of Jess Staley. Even though this investment bank division has been profitable through the first half of the year, Bramson understands the stakes, and he understands what's going on with somebody like Jess Staley, and he knows that as soon as this coronavirus abates and there's any light that it's going to be on again with Jess Staley, the calls are going to be renewed for his removal, and Bramson is playing a game of 4D chess here and is trying to get out ahead of that. Trading in equities and fixed income has been a rare bright spot for global banks throughout the coronavirus crisis, as clients rushed to reposition their portfolios throughout the frenzied markets in the first half of the year. Barclays recorded a 106% annual increase in fixed income trading in the first 3 months of the year, followed by a 60% rise in the second quarter. Bramson does not care. He's playing the long game. Of course, it's nice to have the profits in the short term, right? And for people who are, getting in for a quick profit and getting out, well, then that's fantastic. That's great news. But when you're talking about somebody like Edward Bramson and Sherborne, they're looking at the big picture here. And they know the relationship between Jess Staley and Jeffrey Epstein is eventually going to completely come bubbling to the surface, and everybody's going to have to pay attention, not just independent content creators like myself or those of us who are following the story. Everybody is going to have to pay attention to the fact that Jess Staley was Epstein's top banker and facilitated many, many transactions while Jeffrey Epstein was running a human trafficking ring. Over the past 2 years, Mr. Bramson has called on Barclays to follow the example of German lender Deutsche Bank and retreat from investment banking in a campaign that has so far failed to muster much support from the UK bank's other shareholders. And this investment banking is where all of these super uber rich park their money. This is how their money is managed. These are the divisions inside of the banks that take care of people that have millions and millions of dollars. So not you or I, obviously. Ghislaine Maxwell types, Jeffrey Epstein types, all around general scumbags who believe they're better than us. Those are the type of people that have their money in these sort of investment banks. And Bramson sees the writing on the wall moving forward, and he's trying to get out ahead of this. Mr. Bramson's letter said that Barclays should think to reduce assets in its corporate and investment bank by 24%, the first time he has publicly quantified this suggestion. The letter also revealed that he had increased his stake in Barclays from 5.8% to 5.9%. So not only is he calling for Jess Staley's removal, for the investment banking division to be done away with, he's putting his money where his mouth is, and he purchased another 0.1% of the company, bringing his total to 5.9%. That's what his total sharehold is, what his stakehold is in the company, and his investment firm, Sherborne. So they're very powerful inside of this boardroom, and they hold a lot of sway. And we've talked about how the rumor on the street, meaning Wall Street, was that it was common knowledge in the financial sector that Jess Staley's time was limited at Barclays. And the only thing that has saved him so far from being walked out sooner has been this coronavirus pandemic. Barclays shares are down more than 40% this year as increased trading revenue has failed to offset the £3.7 billion of reserves the bank has been forced to set aside in expectation of a surge in loan losses. So their shares are down 40% because they've had to take 3.7 billion pounds of liquidity in reserves and set it on the side for a rainy day because they're expecting people to default on their loans. Well, this is kind of a bit of a easy one, right? Kind of obvious what they should do. Here's an idea. Stop with the predatory loans. There shouldn't be anybody getting a 28% finance fee for a car loan, okay? So, excuse me if I don't feel bad when people default in a situation like the coronavirus pandemic and cause a shitty bank like Barclays to lose money. You know, perhaps if the bankers, the gangsters, the banksters didn't provide predatory loans to everybody, they wouldn't have to worry about people defaulting the second a crisis hits. Meanwhile, shares of Deutsche, which is amid a structural overhaul, are up 12% this year as the lender has held back just 1.3 billion pounds of provisions for bad loans. So basically, they have held back more than double what Deutsche Bank has put aside for those loans. And I don't know if that's a good idea from Deutsche Bank or if their forecasting has seen something that I'm not aware of, but Deutsche Bank is certainly not out of the crosshairs. There's the situation with the New York attorney subpoenaing their records in regards to Trump, et cetera, et cetera. So Deutsche Bank probably isn't the model that you want to build your company after, but I understand their point. They only have $1.3 billion in projected bad loans that they're worried about. Whereas Barclays was double that. So you see why Bramson's freaking out. You see why Bramson isn't happy. And you see how Jess Staley has proven to be ineffective as well as a man of low moral character. In April, Mr. Bramson paused his campaign to unseat Barclays chief executive Jess Staley because of the coronavirus crisis, although he continued to press the board to begin a formal search for his successor. And this is what I was talking about. I had some sources that I know that work in the financial sector that were telling me about this, and this was certainly something that was talked about even amongst people who don't work for Barclays. My sources do not work for Barclays, but they are in the financial sector, and they were all over this, saying that this definitely had legs, this was happening, and that people in the Barclays boardroom were on board with it privately, but publicly they had come out and given Staley the stamp of approval for business purposes. So this isn't something new, and if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know we've been talking about Jess Staley a lot and following this since the very beginning. So again, the writing most certainly is on the wall for Jess Staley, and his proverbial life in the financial sector seems to be coming to a quick end. Mr. Bramson wrote to Sherborne investors at the time that in recognition of the complexity of the management situation presented during the COVID-19 pandemic, it would withhold its vote for Mr. Staley's reappointment at Barclays shareholder meeting the following month. Barclays declined to comment. Now, Bramson was prepared to go in both guns blazing and get rid of Jess Staley at all costs, using whatever considerable power that he had as a big investor in the company, et cetera, et cetera. But like everything else, coronavirus showed up and it changed everything. It put a halt to his plans. He had to, hit the brakes and worry about the financial future of the institution as a whole. And that's what Bramson has been focusing on for the last few months, it looks like. But now he must see something, a chink in the armor or a little light at the end of the tunnel, perhaps, and he has decided to once again renew his campaign for Jess Staley's removal. And what I will say to that is, good. he most certainly has my support and the support of the Jeffrey Epstein show, because Jess Staley is a bad player here, folks. He's somebody who was an integral part of Jeffrey Epstein's money management. He was somebody who had a very close personal relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, visiting the island even. And he is somebody who should never have been given the job at Barclays in the first place. So the fact that Bramson is charging hard to remove Jess Staley is most certainly a good thing. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that pertain to this episode can be found in the description box. And to everybody who has donated to the GoFundMe, thank you very much. All right, everybody, we'll be back later.